What's up, everybody? And today we're reacting to part 2 of World War One Oversimplified. We did part 1 yesterday. It was a ton of fun. It was nice. It was short. It was clever. It was funny. So I'm excited to watch this second part and learn a little bit more about World War One, especially the tail end of it, which I think is where it gets really crazy. I'm guessing it's going to mention stuff about Dunkirk and a bunch of other stuff, maybe even the Battle of the Somme and stuff like that, which I'm interested in, and I'd love to learn a little bit more. And I know these videos are a little bit shorter than the other ones, so I'm wondering if he gets into them details. But I guess we'll wait and see. I don't know if you guys know, I've got some new merch on. Get out of the way, look at that. I got my active camouflage original human hat. What do you guys think? Active camo? Let me show you what it actually looks like. Right there, it's a nice green hat. But we're going to call it the active camo hat. It's not available yet. I'm still working out the details, but I'll let you guys know when it's available. And when they are available, there will be like a limited amount. So, yeah. Stay tuned for that, guys, okay? But for now, let's shut up. Let's pop this up and let's watch it, shall we? Part 2.
Both sides stuck in a hard stalemate. They knew this war wasn't going to be about taking territory, but about simply wearing each other down.
Yeah.
The Allies had plenty of men to expend from its overseas dominions.
Jeez.
And the British also started a naval blockade, so Germany couldn't import stuff, like food. Neither side really wanted a long, grueling war, though, so they both thought of ways to break the deadlock on the Western Front. Idea number 1, new frontiers. When the war first broke out, Australia was quick to take German New Guinea. The Allies also quickly jumped on Germany's colonies in Africa, and particularly in German East Africa, locals were enlisted as soldiers and carriers by both sides, leading to a tragic loss of life for the native Africans.
Unbelievable.
Some new combatants entered the war as well. The Allies' new friends were Italy and Japan. Japan was busy building itself an empire, so it was more than happy to take away German islands and colonies in East Asia.
Interesting, which is weird because obviously they went on to the German side for World War II.
Had an alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary before the war, but after some tense relations, and then the Allies promising to give them some of Austria-Hungary's stuff, they switched sides.
Wow, because they also were pretty much on Germany's side during World War II. That's very interesting.
Italy opened up a front in the mountains here, but like everyone else, they were stuck in stalemate for most of the war. The Central Powers' new friend was a struggling empire in the Middle East.
The Ottoman Empire.
The Ottoman were divided on whether to actually join the war or not, since they had been exhausted by the recent Balkan Wars. Some of the politicians who did want to join went off on their own and fired some shells at Russia.
Interesting.
And then came back and said, whoops, looks like we're at war now. The Ottoman entry into the war was of particular concern to the British, since the Middle East was full of oil, and Britain wanted all of that oil. First, the Ottomans tried to attack Russia in the Caucasus Mountains, but they weren't prepared for the cold, and many of them froze to death. Then they crossed miles of desert to take the Suez Canal from the British, but that failed too. Then the Allies tried to take the Dardanelles at Gallipoli in a long and hard trench warfare campaign, but that also failed.
It's looking like the Germans and the German allies really did struggle during World War One, like a lot. I'm guessing that turns around right near the end and they take over France pretty much.
The Ottomans blamed their initial losses on the ethnic Armenians living within Ottoman territory, and the resulting Armenian genocide led to the deaths of 1.5 million people.
Jesus.
Then the Germans sent spies into Afghanistan to try to convince the Arab tribes there to rise up in jihad against the British and attack India. But that plan failed, partly because the spies got bored, brewed their own alcohol, and got drunk, which is a bad thing to do in Afghanistan. All these new frontiers hadn't done much to change the war. Aware that the Allies had more men and supplies than them, the Germans knew they had to do something to break the stalemate. Before the war, there was a big conference that set out the rules of modern warfare. No chemical weapons, no killing civilians. Basically, don't be jerks.
Yep.
The Germans held a meeting and decided to be jerks. Zeppelin air raids commenced over British cities. They also started attacking the Allied trenches with chlorine gas and used submarines to sink civilian ships. One such
so they just played dirty, basically.
Civilian ship was the Lusitania, which had 159 Americans on board when it was sunk.
Holy cow.
Swaying U.S. opinion against the Germans. Not to be completely unfair to the Germans, the Allies also engaged in chemical warfare soon after, and they had been hiding anti-submarine weapons on their civilian ships.
Damn, I didn't know that.
Germans justify their attacks. Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary still hadn't dealt...
I didn't know that, and you're not going to know that, are you? Because at the end of the day, the British are the good guys in this, I guess, but still, it's like an eye for an eye, right? I mean, I don't know. It's all stupid, isn't it, really? The fact that this even happened just because people are greedy and they want more land. But we won't get into that, shall we not?
That was Serbia. So the Central Powers enlisted some help. Bulgaria wished it was bigger and was still bitter about losing the Second Balkan War. The Central Powers promised to make all of Bulgaria's wildest dreams come true if they helped, so they signed on, and together they knocked out Serbia.
Yikes.
The Serbian troops retreated through Albania, which was neutral but had some ties to Austria-Hungary. So Austria-Hungary entered Albania in a friendly invasion to chase down the Serbians, many of whom escaped by sea.
Wow.
It's 1916, and a lot is happening. As if they didn't have enough enemies already, Germany added one more to the list. Portugal had been getting a bit chummy with the Allies behind the scenes. Germany didn't like that one bit.
Portugal and Britain have always had a bit of a friendly alliance. A good one.
At the same time, the only sea battle of the war happened. Both sides had a new powerful class of battleships called dreadnoughts, but they were so expensive to build that neither side wanted to risk losing them in a battle. So they kept them in port, except for one time when they had a big fight and a bunch of them got damaged, so they didn't try that again. The UK started conscripting men to the army, so they had plenty of reserves, which is just as well because the Western Front was about to get brutal.
Yeah, it was.
And one of the bloodiest battles of the war started when the Germans launched an attack around the French city of Verdun. The French defended it desperately, leading to hundreds of thousands of casualties. Under pressure, the French called on its allies to do something to draw the Germans' attention away, so the British started their own long and brutal fight, the Battle of the Somme.
Which was a long and brutal fight.
With 60,000 British casualties on just the first day. It was also here that the British first used one crazy brand new piece of sci-fi technology.
Sci-fi technology. Love it.
Russians had been getting pushed back further and further into their own territory, but in response to the French call for help, they began a huge offensive, and did really well until they ran out of supplies and got stuck. Seeing how well the Russians had been doing, Romania decided now would be a great time to jump in and win the war. And then they got pounded. The Greeks were fighting amongst themselves about whether to join the war or not. The king liked the Central Powers, while the Prime Minister wanted to join the Allies. After a brief national schism, during which the country split into two, the king finally abdicated and the country reunited. With Allied help, they began a new offensive. In the Middle East, Russia was pushing into Ottoman territory from the north. The British had also made a landing in Mesopotamia to protect Persia's oil fields, and they had also sent a small army up the Tigris River to try to take Baghdad, but the army got sieged in the town of Kut along the way, and eventually surrendered. A new offensive was launched from the south with all-out desert warfare. The offensive was aided by one famous British officer, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, who helped lead the Arab tribes in a revolt that wreaked havoc on the Ottoman supply lines. By the time...
Yeah, I want to know more about that. We played, there was a Lawrence of Arabia mission, wasn't there, in Battlefield 1? Remember that mission? And it was a fantastic mission, but I want to know more about that character. That guy that we don't know much about. It seems like a very interesting story. I wonder if I think they made a movie about it, right? Like an old movie, maybe.
When 1917 rolled around, everyone was exhausted. There were mutinies in the French army, the German populace was starving, and the war had drained all of Russia's supplies. There was no clear winner, and it was still anyone's war. The question now was, who was going to break first?
Yep.
And the answer was Russia. Tired of not eating, and mad that a crazy magic homeless guy was calling some of the shots, there was an uprising in Petrograd, complete with riots and strikes. The riots turned into a full-scale revolution, and a new government overthrew the Tsar. Then a few months later, the Bolsheviks overthrew the new government, and they pulled Russia out of the war.
Wow.
This was great news for Germany, who now only had to...
So now, now they only have to concentrate on Paris, really, in France. Take over France, and then they're pretty much good as gold there, aren't they? There's obviously the skirmishes down south with the Ottoman Empire and stuff, but for the most of Europe, that is, they'd be pretty much done.
To focus on the Western Front, but there was still one problem. The pesky United States of America was looking increasingly like it was going to join the war. America had been selling supplies to the Allies throughout the war and was getting super rich off the back of it, meaning it was in fantastic shape and was dangerous to the Germans.
Yeah.
So Germany sent a telegram to Mexico saying, wouldn't it be crazy cool if you guys attacked America? But the British intercepted the message, showed it to the Americans, and that was the final straw.
Yeah.
American troops began shipping out to Europe. This was terrible news for Germany, and they knew their only hope now was to force France and the UK to surrender before the fresh American troops arrived. It was now or never, so they started one final attack. They converged their troops and hit hard at the Somme and pushed the Allies back. They hit a second time further north, then again and again. The Germans were spending more and more resources, while the Allies were getting better and better at repelling their attacks. By the fifth punch, the Allies held the line and even pushed back. With American troops now arriving in larger numbers, the Allies launched a counterattack, and that was it. The Central Powers were being pushed back on all fronts.
Nice.
Bulgaria collapsed first, followed by the Ottoman Empire, then Austria-Hungary, and finally on November 11th, 1918, at 11 o'clock, Germany surrendered.
Damn. Oh yeah, why did I say about Dunkirk? That was like at the beginning of World War II, wasn't it? Yeah.
Treaty, Germany was forced to reduce its military, accept war guilt, and pay the bill for the war. After indescribable suffering and millions dead, the world learnt its lesson and never had such an awful war again. For about 20 years.
For about 20 years, yeah. That was good. That was good. And I still feel like there's so much more I can learn. Like, I honestly still feel like there's so much more there for me to learn. Like, I got Dunkirk mixed up with World War One when it was World War Two, wasn't it? And the fact that the Germans did take France, but that was at the start of World War Two. But for some reason, I always thought it was at the end of World War One, and there was a break, and then they fought again in World War Two. I don't know why. But then again, that's my mix-up of learning about World War One and Two, right? Like, it's hard to understand all the logistics of these wars because they went on for a long time. And there was a lot of stuff happening, a lot of politics, which when I was young in the Royal Marines and at school, I had no interest in at all. And now I have interest in this stuff because I think it's an important part of our culture and an important thing to know, right? It's important to know our history. But yeah, another fantastic video by Oversimplified. I highly recommend that you go to the link down below, which is their original video. Go over there, give it a like and all that good stuff. Members, you're beautiful. You're amazing. I love you. I couldn't do this without you. It's been fantastic getting to know you guys in the private Discord. Genuinely love it. Get hyped for the new merch. When it arrives, I'll let you know. Other than that, links down below to all my socials, including the 2 different YouTube channels, OriginalHuman Geek, OriginalAdventures. Check them both out. And other than that, I'll see you in the next video. I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.